Wait. I send you.
Okay. Can we continue our class? Let's talk about it later.
We continue our class.
I thought we have a 5-minute break.
No, I want to change my background.
Are you serious about the 5-minute break?
No sir, we're waiting for you, sir.
Okay, no.
We weren't serious? Oh shit, okay.
No.
My bad. Hold on, let me put this down.
Okay, let's start.
This is our second part of our class for today,
Why?
Tibetan Buddhism in China. Okay. What is important is that Buddhism, this is a continuation of our class on Buddhism in China a few weeks ago. What we can see is that Buddhism in China reached its height and apex during the Tang Dynasty. During the Tang Dynasty, most of Chinese Han Chinese schools of Buddhism were established. So you have Chan school, you have the Pure Land, you have the different Chinese Buddhist sects. After Tang Dynasty, another form of Buddhism developed in China. This form of Buddhism is the Tibetan form of Buddhism. Tibetan Buddhism does not play an important role in the ordinary lives of the Han Chinese, but it played a very important role in the imperial history of China. So when we look at Tibetan Buddhism, we are not looking at the ordinary lives of the Han Chinese, but we are looking more for the imperial connection and the connection between Tibetan Buddhism and Chinese history from the perspective of Tibet-China relations and from the perspective of the ruling or the imperial family of China. Now let's start off with the first part, Meat Buddhism. Meat or Chinese esoteric Buddhism is the first Vajrayana Buddhist school in China, founded during the Tang. Vajrayana, Vajra means thunder, so Yana means way, so the way of the thunderbolt. The Vajrayana school is considered the third school of Buddhism. You have the old Theravada school, followed by the Mahayana school, and from the Mahayana school, a new school known as Vajrayana was created. Vajrayana Buddhist school is the foundation of Tibetan Buddhism that we have today. So what we can see is from Vajrayana Buddhism, the first Buddhist sect in China is known as Meat. Meat as in the meaning of secret. So during the Tang Dynasty, you have people like Vajrabodhi who went to India to collect the Buddhist texts. Interestingly, there are now new sources and new accounts that say Vajrabodhi is not an Indian Buddhist monk, but he is a Malay from Srivijaya who studied in Nalanda and traveled to China to bring a form of this Chinese esoteric Buddhism. Meat Buddhism is very much a magical form of Buddhism, relying a lot on sacred words, on mantras, mudras, hand movements, mandalas, and secret deity yoga. So what we have in Meat Buddhism is a very esoteric form of Buddhism that developed in China. But in Chinese history, Meat Buddhism disappeared from China. But before it disappeared in China, Meat Buddhism went over to Japan, and it is now preserved in Japan as Shingon Buddhism. So Shingon Buddhism is a form of Chinese esoteric Buddhism. Of course, over the years, Shingon will have incorporated a lot of Japanese identities, but what we have here is that Meat Buddhism is considered the founder and the prototype of Tibetan Vajrayana Buddhism that we will be seeing in the subsequent slides. Now let's go to our next slide, China and Tibet. China and Tibet has what we will say as a love-hate relations. China and Tibet relations began during the Tang Dynasty. During the Tang Dynasty, before Tang Dynasty became very strong, Tibet was a much stronger empire compared to the Tang. So the first time Tibet and China met face to face was when the Princess Wenchang was sent to Tibet to be the wife of King Songtsen Gampo. So King Songtsen Gampo was a military warlord, a very powerful.
Hey, let's pause for a short while. You know Wenchang, huh? How many of you all know about Wenchang?
No, sir.
Wenchang is Hainanese chicken rice. You know that, right? How many of you all know that?
Oh.
No.
Hainanese chicken rice.
Mind broken.
Hainanese
We're eating the
chicken rice.
princess?
Yes, Hainanese chicken rice is known as
Yo, let's not kill a person. This is not cannibalism, not yet.
no, this is just to talk about it. So if you know our Hainanese chicken rice that we have in Malaysia, it's actually named after Princess Wenchang. So it's this Princess Wenchang who was sent from to Tibet to marry King Songtsen Gampo. Okay? She's just not known as the person who brought Buddhism to Tibet, but she is also known as the founder of chicken rice, Hainanese chicken rice. So your Hainanese chicken rice that you eat is also known as Wenchang chicken rice.
Winchang.
Yeah.
I want chicken rice. I'm so hungry.
Me too. It's 1 o'clock.
But Dave, can you get chicken rice where you're from? Just checking.
Yeah, of course. Chicken and rice.
Of course.
I meant, chicken rice. With the CHICKEN and the LICE. Chicken rice.
Then Buddhism was unknown in Tibet, and through Princess Wenchang, Tibet became Buddhist, and they converted to Buddhism. Traditionally, it is always believed that when Princess Wenchang moved from Xi'an to Tibet, she brought with her this Buddhist statue, Jowo Rinpoche. Jowo Rinpoche means the precious Buddha, which is now found at Jokang Monastery in Lhasa. So the Jowo Rinpoche is considered the most holiest Buddhist statue in Tibet. During the Cultural Revolution, the Jowo Rinpoche statue was badly damaged and destroyed. This statue that we see here today in the Jokang Monastery was found in 1983 in very badly damaged in a rubbish dump. And it was restored by the Tibetans in Tibet, and it is now back again as the most widely revered statue in Tibet. Now, what we can see here is that China and Tibet had a very love-hate relations. Okay, and in this sense, when Princess Wenchang, I forgot to mention to you that King Songtsen Gampo did not only marry one wife. He married Princess Wenchang from China, Tang Dynasty. At the same time, he also married another wife known as Princess Birukuti from Nepal. Traditionally, both of these wives, Wenchang and Birukuti, were considered as the manifestation of the Bodhisattva of Tara, and they were responsible to bring and convert Tibet to Buddhism. The conversion of Tibet to Buddhism made a lasting impact on a two-way relationship between Beijing and Lhasa. So when Beijing is strong, Lhasa is considerably weak. And when Lhasa is strong, Beijing will be weak in that sense. So it is a love-hate relations between China and Tibet. And what is important for our class today is how Tibetan Buddhism is used in the imperial relationships in the Yuan, Ming, and Qing dynasty. Now let's look at the Yuan dynasty. We have seen that the Yuan dynasty
What was the question again? How is Buddhism used in what?
of the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan that ruled much of the world. We have already seen that the Mongols in Chagatai and Ilkhanate converted to Islam, but the Mongols in the Yuan dynasty and in China converted to Tibetan Buddhism. During the Yuan dynasty, many religious practices appeared in China. You have Buddhism, you have Islam, you have Nestorian Christianity, and you have Manichaeism. It was Kublai Khan that took Buddhism and make it into the state religion of the Yuan dynasty. Now, during the Yuan dynasty, Kublai Khan favored this Buddhist school known as the Sakya Buddhist school. What we can see is that there are actually 4 schools of Tibetan Buddhism today. Okay, these 4 schools of Tibetan Buddhism are the Nyingmapa, Sakya, Kagyu, and Gelug. Different Chinese dynasties will favor different Tibetan Buddhist schools. So in the Yuan dynasty, the Sakya school will be favored. In the Ming dynasty, the Kagyu school will be favored. And in the Qing dynasty, the Gelug school or the Gelugpa school will be favored. So what we can see in the Yuan dynasty is for the first time, Kublai Khan made use of Buddhism to expand his control, not among just the Mongols, but to further his control in other nomadic tribes, for example, the Manchus and also the Tibetans. He appointed the Sakya teacher, Drogon Chogyal Pakpa, as the state preceptor and favored the Sakya school. This is Drogon Chogyal Pakpa. You see him in this pics. He is the state preceptor of Kublai Khan, and through this state preceptor, most of the Mongols converted to Tibetan Buddhism. But let me stress it one more time again. Tibetan Buddhism is a religion of the imperial family, the elites of China, but seldom it made an impact on the ordinary Han Chinese people. Now, from this picture, we can see this is one of the traditional scenes of Buddhism in China. This is the scene where you have Drogyal Chogyal Pakpa as the state preceptor, and you have Kublai Khan over here. So in this picture, in this tanka, we can see that Kublai Khan stopped the ritual sacrifice of drowning Chinese citizens. So Buddhism, in this sense, made the Mongols into a more civilized and human civilization into an empire, which is not as cruel as what we've seen as, for example, in the Abbasid. They basically sacrificed every single person when they conquered the city of Baghdad. Now let's go to the next dynasty. During the Ming dynasty, yes, we have seen in our previous class today, the Ming dynasty was Confucian. Confucian was important, the restoration of the imperial civil examination. Okay, the importance of Chinese imperial scholars. But at the same time, what's important is that the Ming dynasty tried to get help from the Tibetans. Okay, in order to use the position of Tibetan Buddhism is to secure the power of Tibetan Buddhism among the Mongols, Manchus, and the Tibets. During the Ming dynasty, we have seen Emperor Yongle. He invited the fifth Karmapa, He Xin Shengpa Helema of the Karma Kagyu school, and brought him into Beijing to provide a form of initiation. And the Karmapas, what we can see, the Karmapas in this picture, this is the fifth Karmapa, okay? The fifth Karmapa and Emperor Yongle. So you have the Karmapa here, and you have the Emperor. Okay. Notice the position of the photographs. The Karmapa is higher than the Emperor. Similarly to this photograph, this picture, we can see Kublai Khan and Dogen Chogia Pakpa. Okay, again, the position of the emperor is lower than the position of the Tibetan Buddhist leader. Okay, here what we can see is that during the Ming Dynasty, the Kajus were very important. Now let's go to the final part for this class, the Qing Dynasty. Okay, now let me just stress this very clearly. The Qing Dynasty does not fall into the scope of History 101, but we will just continue for a short while to see the links between Tibetan Buddhism and the imperial history of China. Now, the Qings are the Qings were the Manchus, and they were not Han Chinese. So after the fall of the Ming Dynasty, the Qing dynasties was the last ruling dynasty in China, and they were from a tribe beyond the Great Wall of China. So the Manchus were basically very much cousins of the Mongols and the Tibetans. And the Manchus did not favor Confucianism in the imperial family. Yes, they used Confucianism in the state. Okay, they used Confucianism for state purpose. For example, the emperor continued all the Confucian rituals of the past. For example, he will continue to provide sacrifice to the heavens in the Temple of Heaven in Beijing. But inside the imperial family, the Tibetans, the Manchus were Tibetan Buddhists. So Tibetan Buddhism became the religion of the court, the imperial family. For example, in these two pictures, we can see you have the great fifth Dalai Lama, with Emperor Sun Tzu, and you have the 13th Dalai Lama with this is the Empress Dowager. Okay. During the Qing Dynasty favored the Gelugpa school. From the Gelugpa school, we have four important lamas: the Dalai Lama, which is known until today, the Panchen Lama, the Hutuku Lamas of Outer, and the Hutuku Lama of Inner Mongolia. Okay, the Hutuku Lama of Inner Mongolia, this temple actually quite near to Beijing today, the Lamasery of Beijing, and generally the Hutuku of the Inner Mongolia became the preceptor, the state.
How many of you have been to Beijing before?
I have. Very nice place.
Do you go to this temple? The Lamasery. This is just outside Beijing.
I know.
It's one of those places that if you go on a tour, okay, they will bring you there. So that temple is actually the temple of the Hutuku of Inner Mongolia. So Leon went there.
No, I mean, I'm just waving to Zayn, and sorry.
Hey.
What?
So that is the Hutuku Lama temple. That is why, just again, I'm very important to say that Tibetan Buddhism is only important for the imperial history of China, not the ordinary people of China. So the ordinary people of China did not subscribe to Tibetan Buddhism. Only the imperial Buddhists, the imperial family, let's say in the sense of the Manchus and the Mongols, they were Tibetan Buddhists. The Mings were basically Confucianists, but they used Tibetan Buddhism to control Tibet. Okay.
Of the
I was going to ask the question.
China. For example, in this sense,
Yes, what's your question then?
Then what did most of the normal people subscribe to? What kind of Buddhism did they subscribe to? Basic or...
Subscribed.
Yes, subscribe.
They did not subscribe to Nephi, that's for sure. Okay. So their form of Buddhism, okay, is the form of Buddhism that we last seen during Tang Dynasty. So the people of China, okay, the Han Chinese, their form of Buddhism is the form of Buddhism found during Tang Dynasty. So you have Chan Buddhism, you have Tian Dai, you have all those different Buddhism. That basically Buddhism in China, okay, for the Han Chinese, it reached the apex of Tang Dynasty. After Tang Dynasty, there are changes, but it's not as significant as to what it has achieved during Tang Dynasty. So
it's from the Tang Dynasty all the way up.
No, during Tang Dynasty is the height already. So during Tang Dynasty, all the major texts, all the major schools of Buddhism will have already reached its height, and changes after that has been very limited. So for our class today, when we look at Tibetan Buddhism, it's basically only important for imperial history. So it is important only for imperial history, not for ordinary people. Okay? Next.
Well, the Ropa Dorje, the Hutuku Lama of Inner Mongolia, became the imperial preceptor of Emperor Qianlong. So with this, we are done with Tibetan Buddhism. Again, let me summarize. Tibetan Buddhism in China is not a religion of the Han Chinese. It is not a religion of the Ming Dynasty. It is a religion of the imperial family of the Yuan, the Mongols, and a religion of the imperial family of the Qing Dynasty. Okay? What is important about Tibetan Buddhism is how it influenced imperial relations between Tibet and China, and how it influenced the role of Buddhism as an imperial religion among the members of the imperial family and the elite of China. So in Tibetan Buddhism was never a religion of the Chinese masses. Now, let us summarize our course and Chinese history for History 101. What we can see from our first class on the Xia dynasty until the Ming dynasty today is that Chinese history is cyclical. There is always the period of fragmentation, reunification, ascendancy, climax, and then decline. Every single dynasty goes through the same thing. And every time that the dynasty falls, a new emperor will claim the mandate of heaven. And this mandate of heaven is only temporary. So once heaven shows displeasure in the ruling empire or the ruling emperor, you have earthquakes, you have famines, you have floods, and the mandate of heaven is taken back. What is also important in Chinese history, you can see the rivalry between the Han Chinese versus the non-Han Chinese. So in this case, you have the Toba, you have the Mongols, and you have the Manchus. And finally, in our class, today we have seen the arrival of the Europeans. Next time, when we come back for History 102, the role of the Europeans will much clearer. In 1839, when the first time the Qing dynasty went to war with the British, they noted that the cannons of the Qing dynasty could not even fire the ships of the British ships, whereas the British ships' cannons could easily break through all the coastal defenses of the Qing dynasty. Finally, Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. These three religions provided the moral and the religious ethics of the empire. Buddhism was an imported religion, a religion that was suited to fit the Chinese empire. We can see in two classes, Buddhism provided a new religious idea for the Han Chinese masses. And in today's class, we saw that Tibetan Buddhism became important for the imperial history, not for the people of the ordinary Han Chinese, but for the imperial history of China. Now, let's take a short break, and then we'll be back for Kahoot. So,
No one to Kashoot.
okay, that for our class.
Okay, we'll stop now because anyway, our class we have to stop because it says there's remaining meeting is 4 minutes. Okay, so let's stop and then let's join back again for Kahoot. Okay, let's see whether Kahoot can work over online or not. Okay, let's stop here. Then we'll come back. And to reopen the file again.
So how's everybody doing?
Is it okay? Okay,
No,
well,
I asked.
we do the review after this. Okay, how do I go out of this?